I've always believed that the truth isn't a solid object. In my line of work as a senior litigator, the truth is more like clay. You can pull it, stretch it, and mold it until it looks exactly like what the jury wants to see. I've spent 15 years making the guilty look innocent and the innocent look like fools. Naturally, I applied those same skills to my marriage. My husband, Mark, was the perfect defendant. He was a high school history teacher with a soul made of old paper and good intentions. He was the kind of man who still wore a watch he had to wind by hand and spent his Saturdays meticulously weeding a garden that produced nothing but kale and quiet satisfaction. He was predictable. He was safe. And God, he was boring. Then there was Julian. Julian was the lead architect for a firm that built skyscrapers, glass and steel monstrosities that defied gravity. He was everything Mark wasn't. Arrogant, expensive, and volatile. Our affair didn't start with a spark. It started with a forest fire. We met at a zoning hearing, and by the time the meeting adjourned, we were in the back of his car. For 18 months, I lived in the gray space. That's what I called it. The space between the lies. I had a burn phone hidden in a hollowed-out legal encyclopedia in my home office. I had a separate bank account at a credit union 3 towns over. I never used our joint credit cards for anything more scandalous than a latte. I was a professional. I was the smartest person in the room. Or so I told myself every night when I crawled into bed next to Mark, smelling faintly of Julian's cologne and my own deceit. The beginning of the end wore a cloak of white snow. The firm is sending me to a summit in Aspen, I told Mark over breakfast. I remember the smell of his burnt toast and the way the morning sun caught the gray in his hair. It's a litigation retreat. Hardcore strategy sessions, 6 a.m. starts. I'll be exhausted, Mark. I probably won't even have the energy to FaceTime. Mark didn't even look up from his grading. Aspen in February? Pack the heavy coat, Sarah, the one I got you for our anniversary. You know how you get those chest colds. The guilt was a tiny prick, like a needle under the skin, but I flicked it away. I didn't pack the heavy coat. I packed silk slips, lace lingerie, and a red dress that cost more than Mark's first car. The weekend in Aspen was a fever dream of luxury. Julian had booked a private chalet. We weren't just hiding. We were flaunting it in a world where nobody knew our names. On our final night, we went to the Peak. It's a restaurant where you have to take a private gondola just to reach the entrance. We drank a 2012 Mouton Rothschild. We ate Wagyu that melted like butter. We laughed about our real lives as if they were bad movies we'd seen once and forgotten. When the bill came, it was $2,482.10. I insisted on paying. I wanted the power. I pulled out my secret card, the one Mark had never seen, and swiped it with a smirk. To us, Julian whispered, kissing my neck. To us, I replied, feeling like the queen of a kingdom built on secrets. When I returned home, the air felt different. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you're certain someone was just there, even though it's empty? That was my house. Mark was different. He was too kind. He brought me tea without me asking. He asked about the strategy sessions in Aspen with a level of detail that made my skin crawl. So, did you enjoy the keynote on tort reform? He asked one night, leaning against the doorframe of my office. It was dry, I lied, my fingers flying over my keyboard. The usual legal jargon. Mark smiled. It wasn't his usual warm smile. It was the smile of a hunter who has already set the trap and is just waiting for the snap. Funny, Mark mused, tapping his chin. I read an article saying that summit was actually canceled due to the snowstorm. You must have had a very private session. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. They moved it to the hotel ballroom, I said, my voice steady. We didn't let the snow stop us. Mark nodded slowly. Of course. You're very determined, Sarah. It's what I've always admired about you. A week later, Julian called me from a burner phone. He sounded like he was vibrating. It's over, Sarah. Vanessa, my fiancé. Her father is moving the wedding up. If I don't marry her, I lose the partnership. We have to go dark. No calls, no texts, nothing. I was a disposable asset. The realization stung more than the breakup. I had risked my stable life for a man who viewed me as a line item on a balance sheet. I cried in my car for an hour, then wiped my face, put on my wedding ring, and went inside to play the role of the devoted wife. 2 months later, Mark sat down at the dinner table with a tuxedo bag. "Big night?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "A former student of mine," Mark said, his voice light. "A real high flyer, Julian Sterling. You might have heard of his firm. They do those big skyscrapers." The world tilted. I felt the blood drain from my face so fast I thought I might faint. "Julian? You taught him?" Mark zipped up the bag. "A P history, 10 years ago. He was brilliant. A bit of a narcissist, but brilliant. He invited me months ago. It's a huge society wedding at the St. Regis. Why are you shaking, honey? Is the heat off?" I have a headache," I stammered. "That's a shame, because I really need you there, Sarah. As my +1. It's a black tie affair. Why don't you wear that red dress? The one you bought for your business trip?" He knew. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't suspicious. He was informed. The St. Regis was draped in white orchids and filtered light. It was the kind of wedding that cost $500,000. Julian stood at the altar, looking like a prince in his bespoke tuxedo, while Vanessa, a girl who looked like she'd never had a dark thought in her life, beamed at him. Mark led me to our table. It was right at the front. Table 2, the honored guests. At every place setting, there was a small, elegant white box tied with a gold ribbon. "What are these?" Vanessa's mother asked from across the table. "A little something extra from the groom's extended family," Mark said loudly, his voice carrying. "Go on, open them. It's a story in every box." I watched, paralyzed as 12 people at our table untied the ribbons. Inside wasn't a chocolate or a candle. It was a high-resolution color printout. One was a photo of me and Julian on the balcony in Aspen, his hand inside my robe. The second was a photocopy of a credit card statement, my secret account, with the $2,482.10 dinner at the Peak highlighted in neon yellow. The third was a printed transcript of our last secret text exchange. The silence that hit the room was deafening. It started at table 2 and spread like a virus. One by one, guests at other tables began opening their boxes. Mark had put one at every single seat in the hall. 200 guests were now looking at my infidelity in 4K resolution. Julian turned pale. Vanessa looked at the photo in her mother's hand and let out a scream that sounded like a wounded animal. Mark stood up. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. He picked up his champagne glass and tapped it with a spoon. "A toast," he shouted. The room went dead silent. "To Julian, a man who builds skyscrapers but can't even keep his own foundation solid. And to my wife, Sarah, a woman who thought a history teacher wouldn't know how to do a little research." He looked at me, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw the man he really was. He wasn't boring. He was a man with a long memory and a terrifying capacity for patience. "I checked the iPad, Sarah," he whispered, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "You forgot to unsync the cloud. Every photo you took in Aspen uploaded to our home device in real time. I watched your vacation while I was weeding the kale." Mark walked out of that ballroom with his head held high. He didn't look back once. I was left standing in the middle of a ruined wedding, surrounded by the wreckage of 2 lives. Vanessa's father, a man who looked like he'd killed people for less, was already moving toward Julian. When I finally crawled back to our house, the locks were changed. My suitcases were sitting on the porch, drenched in the spray of the automatic sprinklers. On top of the pile was a single sheet of paper, a divorce filing. Mark had used my own law firm to serve me. I sat on the curb, the red dress ruined, the smartest person in the room finally realizing that the truth isn't clay. It's a mirror. And if you break it, the shards are sharp enough to cut your life to pieces.